If the people like this horse, I would just get it out of the sport, and just maybe use it with some treatment as a hacking horse, as a recreational horse. If they want to keep going, then okay, you're going to use more and more that cartilage. It will end up with an end stage of osteoarthritis. Neurectomy, is that an option? It's an option, but only very temporarily, because I find that neurectomies for coffin joint problems don't work well long term. And once you've got the whole cartilage gone and your subchondral bone exposed, your neurectomy won't work. No way. So it depends also a bit if they like the animal and they want to keep it for a long time, then I would medicate it, see how it goes. Leave enough recovery time in between the shows so that the joint has time to recover, and take it from there on and continue with all the pentosone on the adipine and everything that can help. Pretty straightforward case, like this is what happens in a lot of warm blood church others. I don't know if there are any questions about this. No? Okay. The next one. Ottawa was a very nice quarter horse.
Tem experiência com IRAP nessa articulação?
IRAP, yes, we discussed it. Yeah, so if you don't have any good response with the hyaluronic acid, the classic medication, I would try an IRAP. An IRAP or even a prostride, or just, I mean, there's nothing to lose, you know. But you can always, you know.
It's interesting, sometimes horses that stop responding to corticosteroids.
That's true. Some horses
really well IRAP.
Yes, yeah. And I don't know if it's a synovitis, is maybe, if it's synovitis, is more responding to IRAP or not. But it's true. Some horses do not respond to corticosteroids and do respond very well on IRAP.
They're asking, what's the frequency of IRAP injection?
2-3 times.
PLP once.
And something else that I wanted to say is, you see that extensive to bone formation, we think that it's just a consequence of the chronic inflammation of the joint, and the joint capsule pulling a bit at this attachment on the bone, and then causing this bone reaction. Because this horse had never been injected before. Because you could think maybe it has been injected so many times and the needle has been hitting the bone and has caused. That's not the case. Because we know for sure that this horse had no injections in the last 3 years. Ottawa is our nice quarter horse that you all saw. It's the 3-year-old quarter horse that got acutely lame left hind. So on the clinical examination, we didn't see a lot in the front limb. She was a bit upright in the fetlocks, but she had no problem in the front. In the hind, she was very upright in the stifles. So we thought maybe that's the reason of her lameness. Maybe there is an acute high suspensory. It's a young horse, didn't do that much, so we're not going to look here for chronic pathology. We are more looking for something acute. So we thought maybe it's a proximal suspensory on the left hind. We managed to flex the hock and the stifle in the first 2 groups. In the last 2 groups, we didn't. She was too difficult. We never managed to do a fetal flexion because she was kicking, so we didn't have any information there. She was lame 2 out of 5 on a straight line, so the flexion test of the hock stifle was not very positive. She was on the soft, not more lame, so not on the left, not on the right hand. So our first idea of this is probably going to be a high suspensory went away from number 1 in our differential diagnosis. So we thought it's probably not going to be a high suspensory. And then we put her on the concrete, and that was especially in the first group that saw it, because it went away further through the day. When put her on the concrete on the left hand, she was definitely more lame on the left hind, on the left circle. So then we thought, oh, this maybe could be also a foot problem, because the horse is not showing a lot on the soft, but clearly more lame on the concrete. Maybe it's a foot problem or a lower limb problem somewhere. Would be very interesting to block out that foot and see what happens. If that was a nice horse, that's what what I should have done. What I would have done is block out the foot so that you can immediately rule out foot pain. And if then that wasn't the case, then I would do a classic block, fetlock joint, a back show, and then work your way up. But we couldn't. So what we've done then is the vet at home already medicated the fetlock joint, and I forgot to say, at home the horse was infiltrated in the fetlock and in the hock, but we don't know if it was tarsocrural or tarsal joints he medicated. So because that could give us an indication, so we didn't know that. The horse went then for a bone scan. What we could have done first also, if money was an issue, is do a screening of the hind limbs. Fetlocks, hocks and stifle, and see if something comes out, and if nothing comes out there, then you can say, look, we don't find anything, we have to go to the next level of imaging and we go to a bone scan. Here we did it the other way around, probably because the owner said, look, I want a full investigation. If they come with us for a full investigation, we also do first a bone scan, and then afterwards we start x-raying the important areas. Anyway, so out the bone scan, there was a nice finding. There was increased uptake here on the dorsal aspect of the condyles in the fetlock joint, very significant, visible on this LM. On the DP view, we can't see it. We can't see it because it's a superposition of sesamoid bones. So we don't know from our bone scan if it's medial or lateral. It's difficult to tell. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. So then afterwards, so we knew, I mean, we have to focus on this. The rest of the bone scan was pretty normal. And then they took x-rays afterwards, but I've never saw those x-rays. And on x-rays were not very conclusive, maybe a little bit of sclerosis. I'm not sure if you saw it.
Sclerosis dorsal.
Maybe show quickly the x-rays. Because that's the first thing you do, of course, if you have a hotspot like this in a fetlock, the first thing you do is you take your 4 views or 5 views. Probably you can see this on the dorsoplantar view, that's sclerosis, or on the laterals. Or on the lateral. So it could be for the left hand of the land. Where do you see that sclerosis?
This right here, just a little over here.
Yeah, okay, but this is, in retrospect probably, would you make a diagnosis on this?
No, I think that can be in the range of adaptive modeling horses, so I wouldn't thought much of it. If I had new precipigraphy and radio,
Yeah.
and I put those two together, that's what I would have diagnosed. Now that we have the MRI.
Yeah. So after seeing this bone scan, we already made like between each other a possible diagnosis of what we're going to find. We're probably going to find an increased signal in the dorsal aspect of the medial condyle. We thought of the medial condyle. You can see here clearly changes that are probably acute, but we don't know. Probably we had a bone bruising there or a bone edema caused by bruising or transient edema, bleeding. I don't know how would you. The thing is that we don't know if this is going to go away or not in time. So, but there is definitely trauma to that medial condyle and sagittal ridge area. So that also explains the acute onset. It was a young horse, acute onset, so we probably bruised that bone, did something stupid. What I think we should do with this horse is now give it rest, correct me if I'm wrong, and I would give this horse 2 to 3 months, maybe better 3 months, rest, walking exercise, small paddock, and then have a new MRI done to see what happens, if it disappears or not. Maybe you can comment a little bit on the MRI.
So on this sequence, this low signal is similar to cortical bone. That is sclerosis. And then we have the stir image.
Then you can see it's here on the
Now you have the stir image, and then we have this increased signal sitting here that extends over to here. It's a little bit grainy, but this is real, and it matches up to here. So this can be either transient edema, hemorrhage, or degenerative changes. Probably not necessarily osteonecrosis. And we get a follow-up MRI, and usually transient edema will disappear or get much better in a 60 to 90 day range. Degenerative changes tend to last much longer from that. So your follow-up MRI will typically tell you what that was. Not only that, the horses tend to get clinically better if they have transient edema in that kind of time frame.
So I wouldn't. You can medicate the joint. I'm not sure how much it will help at this point because you probably will find that the cartilage is okay. We don't know that from our MRI, but probably I think it is. It all starts from within the bone. And then I think the most important treatment now is rest, restricted movement. Don't lock them up in the box. Walking exercise, small paddock, small field, and just give it time. That's what I would do with this horse.
Would you do polyacrylamide like Artramid on the tracks on this case?
No, never.
No.
Never, because this is an acute case, a young horse, an acute case. I think the most important is time. Any questions about this case?
I would like to know if it's a real edema.
Well, that's
Edema occurs. How long time it goes away?
2-3 months.
2-3 months.
60 to 90 days. They work in veterinary medicine. We have, I have a lot of follow-ups, and so I tend to see that if they get better, that's the time frame they do. In humans, they've worked that time frame out really quite nicely, and it's roughly the same. They say 4 to 6 weeks, but it's right around the 30 to 60 day range that they get better. Fractures take much longer for that signal to go away, and then degenerative change will stay there for a while.
And necrosis, they stay the same?
Necrosis in humans is actually, they have a pretty specific signal pattern in humans. It's pathognomonic, meaning that's what it is, and what it looks like is they'll have this signal will be right here on the T1 weighted image. The T1 weighted image is the one they use. That's important. And then it'll have a serpentine look all the way. It'll be bordered by black and a serpentine look to it. It's pathognomonic for it. It's quite impressive. And in horses, I haven't seen that yet. I've seen it in a small animal once, but I haven't seen it in the horses yet. But we don't MRI the stifles very much. In the distal extremity, I haven't seen it, but I would imagine that there's some osteonecrosis. We know that there's osteonecrosis based on histopath. That in some of the research models that we've done that happen in the stifle, and we just haven't MRI'd those yet. And we'll probably start doing that shortly.
What are the chances, in your opinion, of the recurrency of edema? So you have a transient edema, so it's kind of come back to your question. Most of the horses are clinically better within 3 or 4 weeks. what is your standard load of work based on the MRI and the chances to recur to the MRI? Because a lot of people don't do MRI or they do just one, they don't want to pay a second one. So it's kind of tough to decide if the horse is clinically sound if you go back to work full speed or full speed. Gradually, but...
Or you don't know?
Well, I know you don't know, but the thing is more about if the follow-up experience he has. If the horse is been off 6-8 weeks or whether just go for it.
So the question is, what's the time frame to go back to work? And I think that's dependent on the horse, really, because some horses have a different ability to go back to work than others. Some of them go back to work just because they're tough as nails. Some horses don't go back to work because they're sissies. So sometimes you have to read the horse clinically, and I think that's you guys. So the time frame is they usually get better in 60 to 90 days, and fluid they're clinically better. That then continues to get better over time. So usually if it's a bone, bruise, contusion, you're thinking about the 3, 4, and 5 month range that they go back to some work and be better. Some horses, I've had event horses that fractured in P3, and 5 weeks later they're back on the course running.
Any other questions? And then we have the last horse, it's a thoroughbred that we saw this morning. We can maybe quickly do the thoroughbred. So there was a thoroughbred, how old was it? A 2-year-old thoroughbred, or 3-year-old thoroughbred. Also had a history of lameness 6 months ago. Was rested, put back in work again, lame, and I think Carlos, you told me 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, suddenly lame, 4 out of 5, visibly lame at the walk. We have some videos, but I'm not here on the computer. But you could see this horse really a short and stride and lame at the walk, left hind. And Julio did the flexion test. He pulled the leg underneath the horse, and the horse was like crippled. So very, very lame. Today we couldn't actually see anything. The horse was very. That looked sound, but it was also very fresh. It jumped everywhere. We couldn't even do flexions or whatsoever. And so we palpated the limb, looked at the limb, and there was nothing to feel or to see, basically. So we sedated the horse and quoted the full ultrasound just by demonstration, and we started from the back to the pelvis and the hip joint and down to the tibia. Our first number one differential diagnosis was a tibial fracture because it was a racehorse and it was suddenly lame. On ultrasound, nothing, and no indication of a tibial fracture. I mean, I don't do thoroughbred, so I don't know how easily you can pick him up on an ultrasound, but Good says normally you can.
Yeah, you usually can see a periosteal reaction on ultrasound right in this region. If you ultrasound them, right, if they are stress fractures. That's one of the more common spots for stress fractures back here. You stick the ultrasound probe on, and you can see the periosteal reaction quite easily. This horse has some interesting scintigraphic patterns of uptake. So this is in the medullary cavity, and it's right around the nutrient foramen. And then this one is around the nutrient foramen, but this one is not, and it's a bit of an interesting kind of configuration within it. And so, at least based on this pattern of uptake, there's 2 things that I would think about for the left hind. One is it has an unusual fracture configuration, and 2, an anastotic type of lesion. And this one, I would say, is probably an anastotic lesion, just given it's round, it's sitting right in where the nutrient foramen comes in. But this pattern is different than most anastotic lesions I see. Most of them are straight and round. This one is a bit different to me. And So I would have a different diagnosis, and then I would take radiographs to try to sort that out.
Then Bruce commented that he sees those, he's got experience with those horses. It's a pity again that we didn't have a full body bone scan, because this horse had also a history of a lameness in front. So maybe if we would have done a full body bone scan, we probably, there was a possibility that we found those nostril lesions also in the front limb in the cannon bone. Apparently, Bruce said to me that they see them in thoroughbreds, that they go around. The horse goes lame left front, left hind, from this disease. In the end, they come okay, but it can take up to a year and a half. That's what you said.
I was just reviewing this excellent paper that's really well written. Actually, you'll find it if you Google under Blake. There's Blake. But yeah, there's 21 horses that we did, that we published a few years back with these, and we were finding multiple lesions in most 18 horses had multiple lesions out of 21, so most did. We did. I think some people have reported that single lesions were more likely to be incidental. We didn't find that. But that was the main thing, quite how long they took to come back. 5 horses were re-examined, a mean period of 189 days after the initial examination. 4 horses had developed new anostosis-like lesions, and 1 had complete resolution of the original lesions. So they do sort of pop up and then sort of pop down